Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to keep an open mind. The United States has over 700 million acres of wild forest. It's quite plausible for someone or something to remain hidden and undetected in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting, innocent passers-by. As an active-duty Marine, I prefer to keep my real name anonymous to avoid drawing any unwanted attention from my superiors. For this story, you can call me Wesker. I've been trained to fear nothing, and the outdoors is my specialty, so it takes a lot to spook me. Anyway, recently I returned home from deployment to my beautiful wife, whom we'll call Jane for this story. It was July, and we wanted to make the most of our limited time together before I had to return to service. Given our shared love for the outdoors, we decided to take a camping trip. We aimed to explore a new, off-the-grid spot in the wild, a place we had never been before. We hoped this adventure would make the most of the hot summer weather and create some lasting memories.
It was an exceptionally hot year, so we decided to go camping near a lake to enjoy the weather. We wanted to escape the distractions of life and technology and spend some quality time together.
We hit the road in my dream car, a Ford Raptor pickup truck, an incredible vehicle with a lot of power under the hood. We had the radio on in the background as white noise as we drove, and talked about some of the exciting experiences I had during my tour in Yemen, and caught up on everything I had missed with Jane. After 4 hours on the highway, we noticed that the towns we passed became fewer, farther apart, and smaller until it was completely remote. As we neared our destination, we noticed fewer hikers than expected, which was unusual since I anticipated seeing other travelers heading to our campsite. Despite this, the trip was going pretty much according to plan. Jane helped navigate us off the main road and onto a narrow, eerie path flanked by towering trees on both sides.
We headed toward the state park down this eerie road. The sun had almost set, and the remaining light was completely blocked by the canopy, making the road even creepier. As we drove, we passed a group of people who looked like stereotypical hillbillies, overweight in checked shirts and baseball caps, and alarmingly carrying what appeared to be shotguns. As we passed, they just stared at us with expressions that seemed to ask, "Where the hell are you going? Are you lost?"
Seeing those guys unsettled me a bit. I couldn't help but worry whether they might have ill intentions or get any unsettling ideas after noticing Jane. Jane is exceptionally beautiful, far beyond average, and I'm not just saying that because she's my wife. She's genuinely stunning, and I feel incredibly lucky to be with her. In that part of town, it's unlikely they encounter someone like her very often. Just in case, I had an automatic rifle in the back and wouldn't have hesitated to use it to protect us if necessary. When we finally arrived at the state park and reached our campsite, it was pitch black outside. Aside from the headlights of the pickup truck and the caravan's taillights, there was no other lights. The campsite was an open field surrounded by waist-high grass and swamp, with the tree line marking the edge of the forest. As a Marine, I was uneasy about being so exposed. It meant that anyone approaching had a clear view of us, while we had no visibility of them, giving them a distinct advantage.
I remember thinking, we're going to be camping in the middle of a swamp? I mean, Lord knows what's out here. It just didn't sit right with me. I was scared.
While we were standing in the middle of the field, we spotted two headlights. Slowly, it started approaching us. It was another pickup truck. My initial thought was that it might be the hillbillies we had seen earlier, so I moved closer to the back of my truck and placed a hand on my AR, prepared for any potential confrontation. Thankfully, it wasn't the hillbillies, but a park ranger. He pulled his vehicle up beside us and rolled down his window. Oddly, he looked worried. His eyes darted nervously as they scanned the dark swamp.
"Hey guys, what brings you out here?"
"My wife and I are planning to spend the night out here." He forced a smile, glancing down to hide his true feelings.
"How long do you plan on staying for?"
The plan was for a couple nights.
Listen, folks, I need to be straight with you. It's not safe out here. There is something in this swamp, a large predator that hunts. Some time ago, we had plenty of visitors, just like you. Then they started disappearing, whole groups. We've lost too many people already. Good people, experienced hikers.
Is this large predator, a grizzly bear, responsible for the attacks?
We found signs, terrible signs. Shredded tents, claw marks on trees. Too big to be a grizzly. Blood trails that lead nowhere. Please, for your own safety, don't stay here tonight.
What else could it be? Are you suggesting a person could have done this?
I've seen a lot in my time, but no person could throw someone's remains 50 feet up into a tree.
In the middle of our conversation, we were interrupted by the sound of a heavy branch snapping in the distance.
And with that, without warning, the park ranger rolled up his truck windows and drove off, leaving us alone in the open field. We suddenly realized we didn't want to be there anymore.
Despite having driven the entire day to get there, we decided to leave. Exhausted, we got back into the truck, drove off the field and onto the dirt road, searching for a safe place nearby to spend the night. As we were driving, I remember my wife and I exchanged glances, silently acknowledging how strange the whole conversation with the park ranger had been. Ultimately, we both agreed that leaving was the right decision. We drove through the complete darkness, nothing but thick woods and swamps. Every 20 minutes or so, we drove past a farmhouse surrounded by fields miles away from the house before it. I had to make a pit stop. I'd been driving for hours and hadn't relieved myself for a while. I really didn't want to stop out there. The place was a little too remote and isolated for me to get out of the truck to take a leak. Eventually, I had to pull over and got out. As soon as I did, an unsettling feeling washed over me. I felt like I was being watched. I decided not to stray far from the car. Standing just outside the door, I turned my back to Jane, ensuring she had my six, and took a piss right beside the truck, staying close to my only source of safety. As I'm peeing, suspiciously, the usual sounds of the woods, like the sounds of the buzzing insects, stopped. I knew this eerie silence could only mean one thing, that a large predator was nearby. As I scanned the darkness, midstream, a primal howl shattered the silence, instilling intense fear within me. Goosebumps erupted as the hairs on my body stood on end. Though it sounded distant, it was thunderous and deep, rumbling through the air and the ground. I felt the vibrations resonate through my entire body. I had never heard anything like it before. The only predator out here capable of such a howl would be wolves, but this was different. This was deeper and more sinister. I was scared. If I had to compare, it sounded chillingly like a cross between a wolf's howl and a lion's roar, a sound that shouldn't exist in these woods. I began thinking to myself, something is seriously wrong here. I looked over to Jane and saw her eyes wide open with fear. I remember asking her, "What the hell was that?"
I'm not sure. You would know better than I would.
I have no clue, babe. I have never heard a noise like that before.
After hearing that howl, I was shaken to my core. It didn't sound close, but it didn't sound too far away either. I scanned the tree line, straining to see anything through the darkness, but there was no movement, nothing to indicate what was out there. It was just still and quiet outside.
I quickly zipped up and walked to the back of the truck. Grabbing my AR, I switched on its mounted tactical light and aimed the beam towards the direction where I had heard the howl. The light cut through the darkness, scanning the forest. I was ready to shoot anything that emerged from those woods. Then I heard a rumbling sound. Thick, heavy tree branches snapping. Something was crashing through the forest, charging toward us like a bull. I took aim in the general direction. my finger ready on the trigger.
Wesker, we need to leave right now. Something's not right.
Don't get scared, honey. We got firearms. Just relax, okay? I remember thinking to myself, there is nothing in these woods that I haven't seen before, but I couldn't shake the growing dread that whatever was out there might be worse than anything I'd ever faced. Then the thrashing noises from the woods abruptly stopped. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was about 30 seconds. My eyes locked on the iron sights, straining to catch any movement in the shadows. Suddenly, I heard heavy breathing coming from my 9, slightly to the left in front of me. Slowly, I shifted the beam of my rifle towards the direction of the sound. What I'm about to tell you is hard to believe, but as I mentioned at the start, keep an open mind. I know this is real because this is what I saw. What I saw was a hairy animal, a nightmarish figure, hidden about 40 feet in front of me behind the trees. It peeked out from its cover, one arm draped around the trunk of the tree as if to steady itself. The thing looked disturbingly dog-like, and I could barely believe what I was witnessing. The creature was enormous, easily 4 feet tall, with large pointed ears that jutted forward like a Doberman's. Its eyes glowed a golden amber hue. What I was looking at was a nightmarish vision of a stereotypical werewolf, straight out of a horror film. It resembled the werewolves from the movie Underworld exactly, with a canine snout and a massive head covered with thick, black fur. As I locked eyes with it, the chilling gaze of a predator stared back at me. In that moment, the horrifying truth struck me. We were being hunted. I was frozen, paralyzed by a mix of terror and awe. It was Jane's scream from inside the truck that yanked me out of my trance, shaking me back to reality. Then it did something so strange that it still haunts me to this day. The creature stepped away from the tree, and I heard 2 unsettling pops and crackles, like knuckles being cracked and bones breaking. It slowly rose up on its hind legs, its dog-like limbs straightening until it towered over 8 feet tall. The sight was horrifying. A monstrous transformation that sent chills down my body. Its body was muscular, like a bodybuilder's. It was so jacked and shredded with unnaturally long arms that hung down too far for its frame. At the end of those arms, to my disbelief, were hands, tipped with sharp claws. Its hands were huge, its chest was jacked, and this thing had abs like it banged out the gym. Its legs were skinny but ripped, bent backwards like a dog's. I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing, my mind failing to make sense of this monstrous figure before me. The sheer impossibility of it left my brain scrambling, trying to piece together the horrifying reality. Then it took a step towards me, growling and baring its teeth. That's when my training kicked in. Shoot with both eyes open. Shoot to kill or incapacitate. The shots echoed in my ears as the bullets struck the creature's muscular chest. But instead of dropping, it just paused, slightly stunned, and growled at me, enraged that I dared to shoot it. Then, in an unbelievable display of agility, it leaped 15 feet into a tree, disappearing from sight. This massive, 8-foot, bodybuilder-like beast leaped 15 feet, and I couldn't process it. At that moment, a single, desperate thought crossed my mind. I had to get Jane and I out of there.
That's when I heard Wesker sprinting from the back of the truck toward the front, screaming at me to jump into the driver's seat.
Get in the car
His voice was filled with panic as he yelled, "Get in and drive. We need to get out of here now."
The tires screeched as they spun, and we sped off. I'm pretty sure Jane had her foot pressed all the way down on the accelerator. She just stared straight ahead as she drove, tears streaming down her cheeks. I wasn't sure if she had seen everything in the same harrowing detail I had, but I knew she had seen enough.
I was shaking. I could feel my heart beating. I had never been that scared in my entire life. I couldn't believe what I had seen. It was a Dogman or werewolf.
As we sped down the pitch-black, uneven road faster than we probably should have, the car bounced wildly. We hadn't put on our seatbelts in our rush to escape. I gripped my rifle, struggling to keep it steady as I pointed it out the window, aware of the danger of accidentally shooting one of us. We were still a long way from home, deep in the dark woods. My head was on a swivel, scanning the environment for any sign of another attack. Suddenly, on my passenger side window, there it was, running alongside us, matching the speed of the truck. We had to be going at least 50 miles per hour, yet it kept pace effortlessly. The crazy part was, it was running right next to us on two legs. I could hear its feet pounding the dirt road, thudding in rhythm with the truck's tires. Its muscles rippled under its black fur, each stride a terrifying display of raw power. At this point, all my training had gone out the window. I was terrified. As it ran, it lowered its head to my passenger window and locked eyes with me. Its huge amber eyes burning through my soul. Its lip curled up, revealing long, sharp teeth, and it smiled at me. I know it sounds insane, but it was the most evil thing I had ever seen. Nothing compared to the sheer malevolence I felt emanating from it. I was overwhelmed with helplessness, fearing not only for my life, but for Jane's too. In that moment, I felt like it was all over. It seemed to see everything in that glance, and that was why it was smiling. Because it knew I was terrified and had given up. In a desperate move, I aimed my rifle directly at the creature's face as it continued to sprint alongside the truck. I was ready to empty the entire clip into its face. What's real crazy is the creature recognized the gun. As soon as it saw me pointing the rifle at it, the beast leapt out of sight, as if it understood the threat of the rifle. And it knew the pain it could cause. It had either learned from the previous encounter, or already knew what a gun was. It was scary smart, putting this thing right at the top of the food chain. I could hear it crashing through the trees behind us, the sounds of snapping branches growing fainter and fainter until they were swallowed by the roar of the truck's engine.
Wesker and I didn't speak for the rest of the ride home. I think we were both in shock, and quite honestly, I'm surprised either of us are still sane after what we saw. We only began to calm down once we made it back to civilization. Finally, we were out of the woods back in a small town and into a semblance of safety.
We got real lucky. I honestly believe we survived the impossible. Even now, I can't shake the thought of how many others probably weren't so fortunate. How many people had fallen victim to this werewolf or dogman. Their disappearances dismissed as hiking accidents or bear attacks. And how many more of these creatures are out there? I stay up at night thinking about it. The fear still gripping me. The memories and unanswered questions haunt me. Even today, I'm still scared.